Hey everybody, AJ here, and welcome back to the Eagle Ray channel. This is the live stream. It's the much more informal version of the Eagle Ray channel. Normally we have a 10-minute or so video coming out every week, but this week's a little bit different because it was the holiday. We had Thanksgiving come by, Black Friday just passed us. It is Sunday, it's 2 p.m. It's time to get into the live stream though, and that will be going ahead like usual. So if you're new to the channel, if you're new to the chat, hit that like button. We're trying to do a giveaway right now, and if we can get 100 people in the chat, then we are going to do the giveaway today. The giveaway is this Milwaukee angle grinder. I'm trying to get this given away before Christmas, so definitely smash the like button. We'll see how many people we can get in by the end. It's going to be a bit of a short and sweet episode this week because we don't have a watch party for the latest video because it was the holiday this time, but we'll have a new video to watch next week. In the meantime, I wanted to address a certain thing I've seen lots of times in the forums over the past year or so. I've seen at least a dozen instances of somebody coming into the forums on Facebook groups or elsewhere online asking about what type of battery they should get for their boat or their kayak. And it's pretty common for them to mistake a LiPo battery for a LiFePO battery. And that is a fairly dangerous mistake, as it turns out. So I try and catch that when I can, when I'm in the forums. But I just wanted to go over it in as much detail as it takes to really understand, you don't want to be mixing those two together. And probably a lot of you watching this channel already know this, but I wanted to cover all of the details that really break down, not all lithium batteries are the same, and in today's live stream we are going to see why. But if you're here and smashing that like button for me, leave me a comment, let me know where you're hailing from, ask any questions you want. I'm going to cover questions at the end, and let's just jump right into it. So let's talk about LiPo versus LiFePO, because if you've done any hobby RC stuff in the past, whether that's model airplanes or RC trucks or RC boats or anything like that, you're probably very familiar with LiPo batteries. And so this might feel to you like, well, doesn't everybody know that already? Well, no, if you come from the boating industry, if you just got a John boat and you like to fish, or if you're a kayaker, often people have never heard of LiPos before. And I think that for those of us who came from hobby RC, it's a little bit surprising sometimes because they've been around for such a long time. But it really is confusing for a lot of people when people say LiPo. Often people who are not from hobby RC think that they're talking about lithium iron phosphate, which is quite dangerous because there's a spectrum of types of lithium that you could use for any given application, and some of them are very safe to use and kind of decently powerful, and then others are extremely powerful but also very volatile and very dangerous. And so that's the spectrum that we're representing today with these two different types of batteries that very unfortunately have an extremely similar name, LiPo and LiFePO. It's easy to mistake the two. You just have to leave out the F, and the F is the active ingredient that makes all of the difference. So first, let's look at LiPo batteries, because I need to make sure that you guys can see this okay. I'm kind of standing in the way of it a little bit. So I'm just going to grab a handful of YouTube videos so we can see LiPo versus LiFePO in action today. This video comes from a guy named Ariano85. I think it's a guy. It doesn't really speak at all during this, but what's happened here is this LiPo battery has received some kind of damage somehow. Typically what happens is these batteries get damaged during charging because you'll plug them into the charger, and the charger will be set to an incorrect setting. You have it set to 3 cells when you've plugged in a 4-cell battery or whatever it is, and the charger attempts to put too many amp hours into the pack, causes it to overheat. And when most lithium batteries overheat, due to overcharging, they have protections built in. So a lot of people who have a boat are probably familiar with a BMS, which is a circuit that's inside your battery that stops that danger from creating a very dangerous situation. LiPo batteries almost never have a BMS built in because they're designed for hobby RC, where if you put it in an RC airplane, you don't have room or weight for a BMS. So the BMS is actually inside the charger in the hobby market. So if you buy a hobby style charger, then what you'll have is connectors from the battery to every single cell in the battery. And that's why you can see here, make sure I'm pointing in the right direction, right over here, you can see a whole bunch of wires. You don't usually see that in a LiFePO battery, but that's exactly the way most LiPos are set up, because every single cell in here, it looks like we've probably got a 5-cell or a 6-cell pack, I can't tell. But every single one of those cells needs a connector to the charger so that the charger can do the balancing while it's charging. So it's basically eliminating the need of a BMS by putting all of that circuitry inboard the charger. So when you buy a LiPo versus a LiFePO charger, those are two very different things too, just like the batteries. But when you're charging one of these batteries up and it doesn't go to plan, for a LiFePO battery, there's a lot of reasons that wouldn't be a problem, but for a LiPo battery, it is a huge problem. So I'm not sure that that's what happened in this situation, because all we see is the end of this battery. But let's take a quick look at what happens with this pack in particular. Here, sorry, let me get the audio in place for you, just 1 second. Okay, so that gives you a bit of an idea. We're going to look at other videos where you get a better look at the size and type of flames that come out of these things. But this I think was important to show, to give you an idea of how dangerous these things feel when they fail. When you hit a thermal runaway event with a LiPo battery, it is it feels like a life-threatening moment. It really does, because this is, by the way, this is just I think it says 7,100 milliamps. That's a 7 amp hour pack. So we've looked at LiFePO cells on the channel before. This one, for example, is an 18 amp hour pack that I've reviewed before. So this thing, it has about twice as much capacity as the one we just saw on screen. And this is LiFePO, that one's LiPo. And this one, when we talk about capacity, that just means if we pulled the exact same number of amps out of both of these simultaneously, this one would last a little bit more than twice as long. So it gives you an idea of the size of pack you're dealing with. This one that we just looked at is about the size of your fist plus a little bit of your wrist. And that's it. And that, we'll watch it one more time, that creates a flame that's taller than my waist when it's on the floor, when this thing fails. Check it out one more time. And that was just the end of that flame, because when LiPo cells fail, they fail catastrophically, more catastrophically than basically any other type of lithium. And when that happens, they burn basically every ounce of energy that's inside them within a matter of seconds sometimes. So the real danger with LiPo cells is they're going to burn everything they've got in a giant fire compared to their size. And it's going to happen in a matter of seconds. And so the real danger is if you have them near something that's in any way flammable, whatever that thing is almost certainly going to catch fire. And that's why these type of cells are commonly known to burn people's houses down. In fact, more than 10 years ago, when I was not too long out of college, I worked at a hobby supply distribution company where we would import all kinds of items that hobby shops needed from China. So we would get good prices, we would do a little QA on them, and then we would sell them to hobby shops. So we did that with motors for RC airplanes. We did it with LiPo batteries because LiPo had, in the couple of years before that, just started to become a thing. So it was kind of a hot new market. But we put disclaimers on literally everything, big disclaimers, because we knew how dangerous they were. And I was on the phone with hobby shops all over the country every day. That was my job. And they all knew how dangerous they were too. And so we were selling safety equipment to go along with it as well. So we would have these LiPo safe bags, bags that you would store your LiPos in, even when they're not charging, they're just sitting on a shelf. The right way to handle these is to store them in some kind of fireproof container. And so we would sell bags, which it turns out, because I've seen dozens of YouTube videos on this since I worked at that company 10 years ago, the material that they make, this fire retardant material that they make bags out of, not actually strong enough to handle these LiPos in a lot of cases. So what you really want is to put these in an ammo crate. Ammo crates are designed to stop bullets when bullets fail. And so anything steel or aluminum would probably work, at least if it's a small enough pack. If you have a big enough pack, it might melt through the aluminum. But steel will probably handle it. So if you're going to deal with LiPos at all, for any reason whatsoever, you should plan out your storage for these, because when they fail catastrophically. And so if you've worked if you've worked on anything in the hobby world, RC, planes or trucks or anything, you probably have been through this. You understand the dangers involved. And I'll say that some people are aware that the proper safety precaution to take with these is, obviously you want to have a fire extinguisher on hand anytime you're dealing with any kind of battery DIY, but in particular with LiPos, a fire extinguisher is probably not going to cut it. So what you want to do if you have LiPos anywhere in your house, you want an open container of sand, just a bucket full of sand, ready to completely bury this thing if there's ever a problem. And so the proper way to handle LiPos, in my opinion, is if you're going to keep these in your house at all. For example, I have a lot of batteries here. I don't have any LiPos in this house at all. And if I did, I would have proper safety precautions in place. So for example, if you're ever charging them, you never, ever, ever leave them unattended while they're charging. Because if one of these does that while it's sitting in your garage, I know a guy who burned his garage down from this very thing. You want to have a pail of sand ready to just completely bury the thing the moment it goes up, because that's really the only way you're going to protect the surroundings from also catching flame. So that's a basic overview of the danger that you're in when you're dealing with LiPos. I'm going to show one more video just to give you a quick idea of the exact type and size of flame that you deal with just a single cell of these. This guy did an experiment in his backyard where he took a poker of some kind of metal poker, and tried to stick it through as many cells as possible, and he really only hits one cell at a time. So it gives you a clear picture of how much flame is going to come out of just one of these cells. Check it out.
See, that one's got putting a hole all the way in it.
Whoa! It's alright. This could be your house.
Yeah, y'all be careful with these batteries. Be careful with them, you know? Oh man, y'all be careful.
So you could see it went up in just a matter of seconds. It created a flame that was large enough to engulf a person. And that's just one cell. So if you are in a situation where you've decided to use LiPo cells, if you put enough of them together in a small space, that entire compartment is going to be an inferno in a matter of seconds if even one of these cells fails, and that's what you're dealing with. So when people say lithium batteries are so dangerous, they can explode in your pocket. Yes, that does happen, but most of the time, all the lithium batteries that you've ever engaged with in daily life, whether it's in your phone or smartphone or computer, or if you've driven in an electric car, those are different types of lithium batteries, right? Those are a much safer type of lithium batteries. These LiPos are the most dangerous lithium batteries that exist, and it's why we only ever, unless in rare instances, we only ever use them in non-human passenger applications, right? RC applications are fine because if your plane is in the sky and it suddenly gets engulfed in flame, nobody's going to die. Whereas if you are ever in a situation where somebody's trying to use these on a passenger craft, whether that's a boat or a plane or a car or whatever, don't get in that vehicle. That's my opinion. There are people who do, but my advice to everybody who watches the Eagle Ray channel is don't ever do that because you're taking your life in your hand when you use these cells if you're on the craft that they're powering. And the only real exception to that, in my opinion, is the racing category. So in race cars and in race boats, they do often use these cells because if you can imagine, you're in a big championship race against other racing boats. If your competitor is using these LiPo cells, these are the most energy dense lithium batteries on the planet. And so if they're using these and you're not, you're probably going to lose the race. So you have to accept the risk that comes along with these. And if you're racing boats at over 100 miles per hour, you have to imagine there's a whole bunch of other significant risks. Like what if your boat catches a breeze and flies 20 feet in the air and then flips over and throws you onto land? That's a similar level of risk to, well, maybe there's a small percentage chance that one cell explodes and causes the whole boat to engulf in this giant flame while you're on it, right? That's a thing that you have to consider if you're a boat racer. But otherwise, don't use LiPo cells at all. Stay away from them entirely except for RC craft. If you like RC boats, use LiPo cells, that's fine. Store them properly, take safety precautions when you're charging them. Do not use them on a boat that you're going to be on. That's my opinion, and I would never use this type of battery on any boat that I'm going to be manning myself. So let's jump to a couple other situations where I've seen people using LiPo cells who, in my opinion, I don't think they fully understand the danger that they're in when they do this. So this is a channel, it's one of my favorite channels. It's called The Good of the Land. And you can see how many subscribers he's got. He does great videos on all kinds of topics. There was a couple of years ago, he was building an electric DIY kayak, which is a really cool project. I recommend everybody go watch these videos. But in this particular video, he had a speed controller attached to his system. So he had a fairly powerful motor, fairly powerful speed controller. He's pulling, I think, something close to 200 amps out of this speed controller. And so that's pretty difficult to do with your standard marine batteries because you need a pretty giant battery in order to do that, and he's on a kayak. So pretty tough to get that much power into any kayak system. And he was pushing the limit with this of how fast you can take a kayak with an electric motor, which is really cool. I want to do experiments like that on this channel in the coming months as well. But the compromise that he made was, in order to save on weight and space, he used LiPo batteries, and that is highly not recommended. But let's take a quick look at what happened in this situation, because he had a speed controller here, and the speed controller failed to do its job correctly in that it is water cooled, and often you'll need to water cool your components when you're using high powered electronics. But this particular unit he bought from a company in China who wouldn't stand by the warranty that was promised by the manufacturer, because it was just your typical Chinese reseller who doesn't care about anything you do with the product after they get it to you. It's just not their problem anymore. But the quality of this unit was no good, because the fittings that you can see on screen right here, they came loose and they started leaking water from his coolant system into the battery box. So let's take a quick look at that.
Right there, and the reason why is you can just loosen it by hand. So yeah, totally loose, just loose. My connections are good. They're all loose. Look at this. The whole bottom is absolutely soaking wet. There's no way water can get in here. There wasn't any splashing. We're missing that much water. I filled it up before I left. It was this, and all the batteries are just wet. Not good. That is very bad. Look at this. Look. So.
Yeah, so he understands that that's very bad, but I'm not sure if he's quite clear on how very bad that is. To get your LiPo batteries, that many LiPo batteries on a kayak that wet, that's, I mean, he's lucky he didn't have to abandon ship, in my opinion. Like, what are the odds that those LiPo batteries would explode in that situation? Probably less than 20%, less than 10%. But that's high enough odds when you're on a kayak, in my opinion. If you're right out in the middle of the lake, you're swimming back to shore in that situation. Because if those batteries go up in flames, they're going to take out the whole kayak. There is no way you're salvaging that craft. So you're definitely swimming back to shore. And if you're out in the middle of the lake, you better be able to swim well. Because what he's doing here is extremely dangerous, in my opinion. And I'm not sure he's quite clear on how dangerous it is, because he says later in this video, and I'm not saying this to say, oh, what an idiot. No, this guy is very impressive. Well, all the work that he does on his channel is amazing. I love this guy's channel. But in just this instance where he's dealing with LiPo batteries, in my opinion, he's not quite taking enough care. And when people see this, I hope they don't think, oh, I should try that. You really should not try this, in my opinion, because it's quite dangerous. So the reason I get the impression that he is not quite aware of how dangerous it is because he says later, when he's measuring the temperature, which you should do with an experimental electronic system on a kayak, he brought a temperature gun, which is very smart. Let's see if we can jump through to that spot in the video. I think it's, yeah, right here. And let's just watch a second of that. We've got an ad playing in the background. Let's skip that. There we go.
Kind of undetectable. Set our wires. 114 degrees on the wire. Check our connection. 109, 123, 128. This is where we usually see heat. Very nice. 93. Let's check the shunt. 93. Check speed controller. 150. 149. Let's feel it. Oh yeah, she's warm. I would definitely call that warm. Batteries are ice cold. And just to show you, we had a lot of people concerned about batteries. So 77 degrees. That's lower than the ambient air temperature, like here. 96.
So right there, he says people in his community called out, hey, these batteries are pretty dangerous. And he addressed that by putting a heat gun on them, which is very smart to do. You want to be regularly checking the heat of your components in any experimental system, especially one that has this many amps flowing through it. But he took the fact that the batteries are cool as a sign that this is no problem, I can keep doing this. That is very much not the case, in my opinion. When your LiPo batteries are cool, that doesn't necessarily mean you're safe to have them on a kayak. They're going to be cool as long as you're not pulling ridiculous numbers of amps out of them. Because the thing is, batteries those size, when they're LiPos, typically they can handle immense C rates. Sometimes these batteries are rated at 25, 30, 50 C. And if you're not familiar with C rates, that just means how many amps can you draw relative to the size of the pack, right? Because this pack here has a 1C rate, meaning it's an 18 amp hour pack, so I shouldn't draw more than 18 amps out of it. But if it had a 2C rate, I could draw double that, 36 amps, no problem. Even though it's a small pack, if the chemistry can handle a higher C rate, then go for it. And lipos can handle a very high C rate, sometimes 20, 30, 50 C, for at least for a few seconds. You don't want to pull 50 C even on a lipo pack for several minutes, because they will explode after a while. But in his case, I'd have to double check the numbers. I think he was pulling something like 3 or 4 C, which is no problem whatsoever for lipos. And so of course they would be quite cool. And if you keep them in that enclosed case, they're going to stay cool. They're going to not have problems. The issue with lipos is they could fail for any number of reasons. They could fail because you're drawing too many amps out of them. They could fail because you're overcharging them. They could fail because you're over discharging them. They could fail just because they're old. I've seen old LiPo packs that just get puffy. The thing is with LiPo, the difference between them and other lithium is they're squishy because they have a liquid electrolyte inside. The pouches have to be very loose so that the battery can puff and flex as it's charging and discharging. And the more it does that, the more it slightly starts to eat itself on the inside, until as it's puffing and then it retracts, it doesn't retract as much as it did before, and then it puffs a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until you've used it, say 30, 40, 50 times. Now it's puffed out so big that you can't really use it anymore, or you shouldn't, because if you keep using it, it's going to burst one day. And even if you never use it, it does begin to puff just from being old. So if you have an older cell and you use it just a few times, it could explode on you even while you're not using it. And so that, for that reason alone, in my opinion, you should never put one of these on your kayak. In my opinion, don't do what he did. It's very dangerous. Don't use those type of batteries at all. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't use lithium batteries on a boat or a kayak. Very much not the case. In fact, lithium batteries of other kinds that we're about to look at are the best kind of batteries to use on your kayak, in my opinion. So let's jump over to that. Right here. So this is a puncture test from a guy named Will Prowse, one of the best solar YouTubers on YouTube. You've probably heard of him before. He does all kinds of great videos reviewing off-grid solar systems. And so he's tested all kinds of different kinds of batteries too. And so he's doing a test where he runs a drill bit straight through a LiFePO cell. So we've switched from the dangerous stuff that people use in the RC market over now to the safest lithium battery type that exists, and that's LiFePO, not LiPo. So these are, importantly, very similar name to the most dangerous, but they're actually the safest that exist because they have properties that allow them to essentially eliminate the possibility of thermal runaway in almost all cases. And we'll see at the end of this a chart that kind of proves that. But first, the fun part is, can we get it to explode? So let's watch a clip from Will's video and see what happens.
Dang, look at that, nothing! So a nice slow burn and super boring.
Okay, so there you have LiFePO battery getting several holes punctured through it. If that were a LiPo, just one little prick from one of those drill bits would have caused the whole thing to erupt in flames. And so you can really see the difference here illustrated in real time. The battery is not going to be in good shape when it fails. If you put a hole in a LiFePO battery, it's going to smoke, it's going to get very hot. You don't want it near other things because that smoke is going to be over 200 degrees. You could see on his heat cam, it got up to almost 240 degrees. So if you have that next to something flammable and there's hot smoke just spraying at it, that could cause a fire. But the likelihood of LiFePO causing an immense inferno is so much less likely that it actually has been tested to prove that when you have a bunch of cells together, when it's LiPo, they always burn the entire pack down. When it's LiFePO, they almost never burn the entire pack down. The cool thing about LiFePO is when one of these cells fails like this, it'll burn itself. And it'll smoke a bunch. It'll fill the room with noxious gas that you don't want to breathe. But all of the cells that are right next to it won't be damaged at all. And that's the most common thing for LiFePO. And that's when we say thermal runaway, that's what we're talking about. Does the thing get hot enough, fast enough to burn all the adjacent cells around it? Because if so, then you should not be putting large packs of these cells together in close proximity without extra protection. And so with LiPo cells, if you have a big LiPo pack, you should absolutely think about fireproof protection between each cell. Whereas with LiFePO, you don't really have to worry about that because the chance that one cell is going to fail and burn the ones next to it is so low, it doesn't really matter that much in most cases. So that's why LiFePO is the go-to cell chemistry for the marine industry. Basically, if you type in marine lithium battery, you're gonna see a whole list on Google of LiFePO. They're all LiFePO because they're the safest lithium by far. And in fact, they're taking over the EV industry as well. So in China, they're making nothing but LiFePO cars now. They used to make cars of different chemistries, but they found that those were not as safe as LiFePO, so now it's all LiFePO. And that's starting to happen in the States too. Tesla famously has built a big plant in Austin called Giga Texas, and they're not using LiFePO cells there yet, but they are importing LiFePO cells for the Model 3 now because they know that's the most ubiquitous, cheapest model they have. And so they want it to be the safest car possible, and they had to put LiFePO cells in that car in order to be allowed to sell it in China anyway. So they figured, well, if we have to tool up production to handle that, may as well do it in the States as well. So now they are bringing LiFePO batteries into the States for the US Model 3. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next few years. I think essentially the entire EV industry is going to stop using any other type of chemistry in lithium except LiFePO because it's found to be sufficient to power a car and it's by far the safest chemistry that exists. So I want to wrap up this comparison by first, let's actually look at a case where we can catch a LiFePO on fire, because it's not impossible to get a LiFePO cell to create flame. Most of the time you put a hole in it, it's just going to smoke. But in this video, this guy shows that you can actually generate enough flame, enough heat to create a flame if you give it a high enough impact. So flame, not impossible with LiFePO, just extremely unlikely. So let's take a look at this.
I'm going to stay downwind of it. Luckily, we've got plenty of out in the open space. It's actually glowing in there, red hot. But no fire, so that's awesome. You think I should puncture it again? What do you think, Jarrett?
Sure, give it a shot.
Now there is fire.
Okay, so to give you an idea, compared to the LiPo that we saw earlier, the flame that you see there is maybe this tall, versus the LiPo flame that we saw at the beginning was from the floor all the way up beyond my waist. And the size is very important to discuss as well, because That LiPo cell that we looked at was 7 amp hours. It was tiny. This cell that we're looking at here has probably more than 250 amp hours. So it's close to 30 times the size of energy density in this pack. And yet when you give it everything you've got with a giant stake, it can create a flame, but the flame is not that big. So not impossible to burn things down with a LiFePO pack, but very difficult, and that's why it's the go-to chemistry for the industry. So I want to wrap up before we start taking some questions with a chart that was developed for us by a group called Sandia National Laboratories. So this is a government-funded group. They're basically the R&D arm of the Department of Energy and NASA. So they get funded by the government to do things like test how quickly and dangerously all kinds of different lithium batteries fail. So that's what they did in order to come up with this data set. It's a really great chart to look at anytime you want to understand the difference between all the types, well, most of the types of lithium that we use today. I don't think they have lithium titanate here, which is still commonly available for purchase. But these other ones, lithium, cobalt, oxygen, is I can't find that anywhere for sale these days. NCA also not really available anymore. The green line that you see and the blue line that you see were popular a decade ago. Not really sold anymore because you can see the thermal runaway properties on this chart show they're by far the most dangerous, other than lithium polymer, compared to any other type of lithium. So automatically from this chart you can see there's a whole bunch of different types of lithium, and each one has unique properties that give advantages and disadvantages. But the primary spectrum that you want to keep in mind is it more powerful or is it safer? And the more you move toward safer, the less powerful, the less energy dense the battery is going to be. And so as you look at these giant curves, the green, the blue, and then the red one's smaller, and then is it purple? Yeah, the purple one, which is LFP right here, is so small that on the big chart, you can't even see it. I want to make sure you guys can see this when I move the mouse. Here, let me use my hand. So the big chart has about this chunk of it blown up right up here, because that allows you to see this right there. This curve right here is the LFP curve. That's LiFePO4, lithium iron phosphate. The F is ferrous, that stands for iron, right? And when they put iron in these batteries, they become less powerful, they become safer. And you can see in the numbers, I can't do my Vanna White impression right now. The numbers show here this mark, it hits, you see 1.5. That's the number of degrees that the battery will go up per minute once it hits its thermal runaway event. And so you can see that LiFePO4 heats up so slowly that it would have a very difficult time setting the adjacent cell on fire. If this one fails, this one's probably not going to burn, because this one that's failing is getting hotter by 1.5 degrees. Who cares? Versus if you look at the green line or the blue line or even the red line, those ones, when they hit the apex of that curve, they'll allow the cells that aren't burning yet to go up by over 200 degrees in less than a minute. And that's how you get thermal runaway. That's how you get this cascade failure where one cell goes bad and then it just washes across the entire pack and just burns the whole thing down in a matter of minutes. And interestingly, you can see the big differences between lithium cobalt oxide, lithium cobalt aluminum, nickel cobalt aluminum on the blue line. Those two are not really used in EVs anymore. They used to be used, but they have such intense thermal runaway that they kind of fell by the wayside in favor of NMC, which is nickel manganese cobalt, and the nickel manganese cobalt doesn't get much above 200 degrees at its apex, and that creates an interesting phenomenon with today's modern EVs that use that chemistry, because when it hits thermal runaway, it hits it right, I can't quite reach over there, it hits it right about 250 degrees. Under 250 degrees, your battery's probably not going to fail in a thermal runaway if you have NMC. But once it hits about 250, then the first one's going to fail, and that's going to cascade across the others. But the cascade's going to be much slower. You see the red loop here. It only gets up to 200 degrees in a minute, so it doesn't quite reach 250. And that means that the cell next to the one that's burning is going to very quickly go to 200 degrees, but it's going to have a hard time getting to 250 where it fails also. And so the cascade is probably still going to happen with NMC. It's just going to happen slower. So the trouble with today's EVs that use NMC is they are going to burn the whole car down if one of them catches fire. But they are going to do it very gradually. And so you have these situations now where fire departments trying to figure out how to put out these EV fires where they're not creating the huge inferno that they would have 10 years ago, but they're creating a large fire that just won't go out for hours. And that's largely a property of NMC chemistry. Whereas when we go to LFP instead, you can the thermal runaway is not even on the chart. It doesn't exist, because if one of them fails, probably the rest of the car is going to be fine. That's why China is requiring that all EVs now use the LFP chemistry, which is interesting, but also lithium is not the only way to make a battery. So there's other chemistries that are claiming to be able to blow all of these numbers out of the water pretty soon. So sodium batteries are looking very interesting, and those are going to start going on sale over the next few years. We saw an example last week how there are already a few experimental packs that you can buy, but they're quite a bit more expensive. So they're expected to go down a lot in price in the future. That's the gist of LiPo versus LiFePO. If you're going to use LiPo, do it in an unmanned craft. In my opinion, you should never put a LiPo in a manned craft. And always use extra safety precautions with LiPos, because they are much more powerful, much more dangerous. If you're going to do just general boating things, kayaking, john boating, whatever it may be, LiFePO is the best option at the cheapest price for you in the market right now, and this chart shows all of the reasons why. We're going to check whether we can do the giveaway. It looks like we probably aren't going to have enough people in chat to do the giveaway this week. I do want to try and get the giveaway done before Christmas. So if you haven't hit the like button yet, smash that like button, please, so that everybody can see this. And if they don't make it live this time, we can try and catch them next week. But I'm going to look through the chat, see if anybody has any questions. So if you do have any questions for me, now's the time to write them, because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. So what do we got here? I've got Frank's Diner asking, for testing purposes, wouldn't you be able to build a battery box out of fire bricks? They're lightweight and almost completely fireproof. Absolutely. So the thing that I've done for testing here with these NMC cells, which are the red line there, I play with these a lot because they're a nice balance between a high energy density. They're more powerful per size and per weight compared to these LiFePO cells, but they're also not so dangerous that they're going to explode easily like a LiPo cell. But I still want to take safety precautions when I'm dealing with these in my home. So I use what's called cement board, or I think they call it hardy board also. It's extremely flame retardant. It's kind of like plasterboard, except it's made with a certain amount of cement composite. So it's very difficult to get it to burn. And so I just build boxes out of that, and I put these NMC cells in there, especially when I'm charging or discharging them here at my house. With LiFePO cells, I don't really, I'll just put them anywhere and charge them. Because I don't expect that even if one of them failed, it would cause too many problems. It would just create a bunch of annoying smoke. But these NMC cells, like LiPo cells, these ones that are in your car, when they fail, the red line shows, they'll create a sizable flame, and that flame will stick around quite a while. And so LiPo cells, you definitely want to have sand ready to go, because the sand will extinguish that flame pretty quickly, because LiPo cells just burn themselves out very quickly. These won't create as big a flame, but they will stay on fire for a long time. So I recommend you have some kind of flame retardant casing to put them in, whether it's an ammo crate or, like Frank Steiner said, a brick casing that you want to build, perfect. Or anything like cement board is probably going to be good enough, as long as the battery's small enough. If you have a huge pack of this, like if you have an entire set of Tesla modules sitting somewhere in your garage, I would put each module in some kind of fireproof casing. Whether that's brick or steel or cement board or whatever, do something to protect those cells, because in an unfortunate, very rare event that some of them fail, you're going to have a serious potential fire on your hands. It depends on the situation too, because like I mentioned Tesla in particular, if you use some of their old modules, if you DIY and get a hold of some of their packs, they have a whole bunch of extra safety precautions built in. For example, each module that they built into the car was encased in epoxy. So there's like this much epoxy in between every single cell. And so if one of them fails, not only is the thermal runaway only going to hit 200 and possibly not ignite the cell next to it because it's NMC, but in addition, they have a whole bunch of epoxy between every cell, so that it's even less likely that there's going to be any thermal runaway. So people talk about Tesla fires in the news all the time. It's an extremely rare event, because these only fail, once in a blue moon, once in 0.001% of cases anyway. And when these NMC cells fail, the cylindrical ones, they have a pressure cap that is designed to pop off and let all the pressure out. And if the pressure lets out fast enough, then there won't be any flames anyway. So these don't often even catch fire. When they do, the fire is going to be pretty big, but some companies take extra precautions on top of that. So like Tesla is known to be very good about thermal management of all of their packs. They use epoxy between the cells. They also have these snaking aluminum coolant lines running through every single cell. So they definitely go the distance on safety, which means if you spend the exorbitant amount of money on a Tesla, you're in a very safe vehicle. Like if it ever did catch flame, you'd have time to get the heck out of there before it caused any danger to you or your family. Whereas if you build a DIY version of a Tesla where you just get a bunch of these and wire them together, much more dangerous. So if you want to create a brick enclosure to protect your house from receiving any damage if something goes wrong, definitely do that. Do something for sure. So I appreciate the question, Frank. If there's anybody else who is curious about anything LiPo, LiFePO, or anything else about the channel, now's the time to ask, because we're going to wrap up in a bit. We have the holidays we're trying to get through, so it's a little bit harder to stay on the same release schedule. I've got a video coming out about how I wired the switch for the actuators that lift my dual motor system from a couple weeks ago. I was trying to get that video out this week. Wasn't able to make it with Thanksgiving coming down the pike. So that's coming in the next few days. And then the Sunday live stream, I'm going to be pressed for time to get to it this coming Sunday, but I am still, as of right now, the plan is still to do another live stream this coming Sunday. So I'll let everybody know in the community notes if that needs to change for whatever reason. But even though it's holidays, it's super busy, I am going to try and make it to the live stream next week. So if we're not going to be able to do the giveaway this week, but let's try and get more people in the chat. Hit the like button, share it on Facebook or wherever else. Tell your friends that they could win an angle grinder, because A lot of people, I think, who watch the channel probably already have an angle grinder of some kind, but this, I think, is a great holiday gift for a teenager who's never really done any boat work before. If you're going to do work on a john boat or a kayak or anything like that, especially if you're dealing with anything aluminum. I'm doing a lot of aluminum mods on my kayak out there right now. But a lot of john boats are made out of aluminum too. Any metalworking you need to do, you got to have an angle grinder. It's one of the best things you can start with if you're just building up your power tool kit. This was one of the first tools I ever bought when I started collecting power tools. Milwaukee is a great company. They're fairly expensive. But mostly the batteries are extremely expensive. So I've got Milwaukee batteries here. I'm going to give one away with this so that you don't have to go and buy the ridiculously expensive battery in order to power this thing. So whoever wins this is going to get like a $200 value for Christmas if we can get the giveaway done before Christmas. So smash that like button. Let everybody know who might have a nephew who wants to win this for Christmas. And I will see you guys next week. I'm going to be back on the water just once this week. It's a busy week, but I'm definitely getting out to the lake one more time before Christmas comes around. I think it may be the last time this year that I'm going to be able to get out on the lake. So we'll still have videos coming out, but they're going to be the more informational stuff that I do in front of the green screen. But I do like to get out on the water as much as possible. And it's getting colder here in the Southwest. It's cold at night, but it's still warm enough during the day that I can go out. I don't know if anybody else has packed in for the winter already, but I do hope that you guys, if there's enough pleasant weather, you guys are able to get some enjoyment on the lake or river or wherever you guys fish before the end of the year. Otherwise, we'll have to wait for the sun to come back out in the springtime, and in the meantime I'm still going to keep making videos for you guys. If anybody has anything they want to add in chat, speak now or forever hold your peace, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.